Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, I think last time we met was 2 weeks ago, and we were discussing the transition from being a shepherd to being a businessman, the Prophet ﷺ, and how that became a point of kind of connection to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, right? That the Prophet was essentially introduced to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha's older sister because he was a shepherd of a flock that she had. And that then became an entry point to him meeting Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. We talked about who he was as a business person and how his character was something that was just very deeply defined in relation to all of these interactions through these trade routes, other kind of businesses that he was setting up. Does this sound like it rings a bell? Yeah. So we want to kind of understand some of these things, in particular reference to the prophetic biography, right? The life of the Prophet alayhi salam, you can understand in different stages. And some of what we're looking at right now are essentially key events that take place pre-prophethood. But we're getting to a place now where we're wrapping up on what those major things are and understanding where we can extrapolate lessons, because it's all still part of the process of his being made ready to become a prophet of God. So what we want to think about here are two more events. We probably won't speak about both of them today, but just to kind of get to that place and then give people an idea that before kind of the winter break, we'll actually get to the place where Revelation comes in the Meccan period. The two kind of remaining major events that are in this pre-prophet mode in the Prophet's life are his marriage to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and an instance pre-prophethood where the Kaaba has to be rebuilt, and the Prophet plays like a critical role in this, right? Some of you probably heard this story where the Prophet kind of comes in to help place the black stone back. Right, we'll talk about it in more detail. But these are two things that are going to be coming up in our discussion. But some of what we want to be able to extrapolate from this is an understanding that there are lessons that can be derived from the entirety of the Prophet's life, even in the times that were pre-prophethood. And understanding here now a little bit more about some of what is going into their relationship prior to their marriage. The Prophet ﷺ has this relationship with Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha that is a very specific form of kind of business within Islam. It's called the mudaraba form of investment, right? And partnership, where essentially I could have wealth and you are somebody who has skill and labor. I invest in a business and there's a profit sharing model that goes into it that enables there to be now a shared element. Our religion doesn't commodify money. Does this make sense? Right? Like when we think about interest and why it's a problem in our religion, we think about the practice of lending. Like these are things that take place as transactions. The Prophet himself had loans that he took out, and it became a basis of being able to demonstrate further their permissibility. But the way that, like, I can sell you a laptop, right? I can sell you a table. I can commodify certain things. Money in and of itself is not something that is turned into a commodity in that way. And one of the reasons as to why this is something that isn't commodified is because it's just a mechanism now that enables the wealthy to become wealthier and the poor to become poorer. Because if I'm able to lend you money, that's different from this model of profit sharing. Because if I invest in you, right? Paris has $1 million. I don't have $1 million. But I have an idea. I have skills. I have credentials. And so he makes money from his money by investing in the business that we mutually can benefit from, but we mutually can also lose at. Do you know what I mean? Right? When Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha is putting her wealth into this system with the Prophet and is sharing profits with the Prophet, right? So two different versions of this, right? Prophet and prophet, right? It's a homonym. Is that, yeah? Learning 4th grade English grammar, yeah? Homonym. So this is what they're doing. It's really important to understand this because these ideas can exist in societies that don't necessarily have Islam present in them, but there's carryover from these things, which we can extrapolate a lot of different things from, but it doesn't mean that just because something is not Muslim, that it is 100% horrendous. Do you know? And here are things we want to take principles from in terms of business ethics. So if I now have this money and I give it to you in this interest-bearing mode, the way that we see in terms of credit cards, student loans, like all kinds of things relevant to debt in the ways that we see it, think about the number of people that you know who they're just not like good in terms of like financial constraints. And they're shackled in what is a variation of indentured servitude, slavery, to not even being able to pay the principal, but just paying constantly the interest that's accruing on this. And in this system, who's going to always be the one that wins and who's going to always be the one that loses? Right? No matter what, the guy with the cash who lent the money is going to always be the one that, regardless of what happens to the person that is being lent the money, they're going to always have success in the scenario. The person who is being lent in an interest-based model, they're going to be in a place where potentially you could have some success. You could pay off your student loans. You could pay off your home mortgage. You could pay off your credit card bill. But there's a lot of people that that's not what the reality is. It sets up inequitous systems. In this country, you see predatorial kind of practices around home ownership that exists decades ago that rears now consequences, right? Black people cannot buy a home the same way that white people could buy a home. It's purposeful. Banks were run and owned within this same model of supremacy. This isn't like the business model of the Prophet of God. Why is this important to understand? Because last time we talked a lot about the character of the Prophet. And I asked you all, like, what are some of the benefits? These trade routes, all these things. And one of the things that we also said was, became a prophet, nobody in all these interactions with him could step forward and cast any doubt on his character. Nobody could say he engaged in anything unethical or iniquitous, right? the other person in the partnership is also a person of good character. Khatija radiallahu ta'ala anha also has impeccable, remarkable ethics. She is in a place where the Prophet, he is under the guardianship of Abu Talib. They have respect, but they don't have money. And she is owning up to her end of the deal also. One of the things that we didn't talk so much about is in this place, in a Meccan society, there's no inheritance to women. She has the uniqueness of this wealth coming from her second husband because he had no one else to pass it on. They had no kids. And so the rarity of her acquiring this wealth is something that made her also now a prime candidate for marriage, but she wasn't trying to marry other people, and it wasn't because of a lack of proposals that were coming to her. But people know her as a noble person, upper class, and that she has wealth. And if a man married her, then by virtue and law, her wealth would now become that person's wealth. And as a point of understanding, when we say Islam comes to revolutionize and it offers rights to women, you have to be able to contextualize it in this understanding of every part of what's there. That women in Islam, they keep their own money. They work. They don't have to spend it on anything else. But that's not what it was pre-Islam. And she's in a place now where this man who is a shepherd, who's younger than her, who has this haya that kept him, this sense of modesty from even asking for the wages owed to him when he was shepherding for her older sister. If you remember, we said this last time. And he's known by these characteristics. You also are able to understand her sense of ethic because what appeals to her of him is his sense of ethic. Do you get what I'm saying? Right? Like, I sit with people all the time from all different kinds of issues and challenges. And sometimes I sit with people who, for a variety of reasons, marriages don't work or there's difficulty. And I'm like this in most settings, you know? Unless somebody's doing something that's crazy abusive or oppressive, I'm not going to necessarily get upset or agitated. But there's times I want to shake people. And sometimes I'm sitting with people who have like a rocky engagement of their marriage. And when it comes down to why they married the other person, they'll literally say, like, I know, we weren't compatible in this and that, but he's just so good looking. And it wasn't even that I'm attracted to him. People just kept telling me he was so good looking, and I felt good about myself that I had this good looking man. And it went the other direction too. She was so beautiful, but not like inwardly beautiful, just physically beautiful. And then he doesn't know how to deal with the reality that a woman's body will change after she gives birth to a child, let alone the man's body is going to change, right? But what they're basing it off of is indicative of what's going on inside. I am prioritizing what I will prioritize. Khatija radiallahu ta'ala anha, her innate sense of inner beauty has her see what is innately beautiful in somebody else, right? That goodness is attracting to what is good. So she, because of her sense of ethic, is also attached to ethics. Because she is not enthralled necessarily by the physicality or the outward alone, but this person, what does she know of him? She's in the room with her older sister when the Prophet's shepherding buddy comes and asks for wages for both of them. And why is Muhammad not here? He's too modest. He's too shy to come and do this. He has too much haya to ask himself. What do we know of him? He's trustworthy. He's a person of integrity. These are the things that she is attracted to, and she's making good decisions. When you have somebody that's remarkable, think about the prophet. What's his resume going to look like? I'm a shepherd. How is that relevant to his now running trade routes? She's not hiring him to do this work because he's done it for 10 years. She just knows that's not somebody that I'm going to let anybody else, because he's got this unique sense of being. Do you get what I mean? And then when it comes time, she knows too, this is the type of man I want to be married to. And the prophet also has gotten other proposals. But when he is trying to decide who he wants to get married to, then also there's the realities that like people did not accept proposals from them, right? We don't want to have this mindset that is just, it was like I had my pick of the draw and I was just going to pick. That's not what it was. We said this last time. There's people that the prophet like was proposed to from, but he also put forth proposals. They didn't go forward. But he recognizes who she is in terms of her character and ethic. Why is this important? Because when you pull up hadith that talk to you about why you should marry somebody, and it talks about the important variables of all these different things, but from the standpoint of both men and women, the different hadith, like, and the recommendations, it talks about deen, right? Like, they should have good deen. And definitively, like for Muslims, a Muslim marries a Muslim. But the understanding of deen is not, that guy bends his back so well when he prays, or the recitation is so beautiful, or the hijab is so nice. Deen, in large part in our religion, is also about character. And if you marry somebody just because they read the book very well, but they don't live the book, then that's what you're marrying. There's hadith where the Prophet is asked by his companions about a woman who prayed a lot of extra prayers and gave a lot of charity and did all of these extra acts, like outwardly, that we would equate with a high level of virtue and piety. And they say that her neighbors are harmed by her tongue. She speaks poorly to people. Instinctive. No hesitation. La khayra fiha, hiya min ahl an-nar. There's nothing good in her. She's from the people of Jahannam, the people of fire. May Allah protect us from it. On the other end, they ask of a woman. She doesn't really do more than just like the basics. She's not giving a lot of charity, she's not praying in the late hour. But nobody is hurt by her tongue. The Prophet says, hiya min ahl jannah, she's from the people of paradise. You can have relationships with people, marital, romantic, friendships, acquaintances, that are rooted in societal constructs and expectations of the people you're supposed to be with. If you don't have compatibility at the level of ethics, the level of character, you're not thinking about this as a prominent part to what's going on. And it's important to understand, right? This is not like to be clever or anything like that. It's just reality. Why is it important that the Prophet is somebody who honors women and all these things that we talked about before? He had 4 mothers, like these wet nurses, Ayman Baraka, Thuwayba, Halima Sadiya, his own mother Amina, and what it plays a role in terms of his interactions. And these women are taken aback by the modesty that he has. If you are a man that treats a woman good, you're probably good in everything else too. And not good like, I'm going to buy you all these nice things and whatever else, right? But you honor somebody's rights, especially in this society where they're burying women alive. Women can't even inherit money from people. Objectification in all kinds of ways. And he is from the lineage of the Banu Hashim, of the Quraysh. He's the grandson of Abdul Muttalib. They're connecting at the level of character. You want to marry somebody, if you're looking for religious insight, that is a good person. And you want to understand that you are then necessarily also someone that has to be good. And moral understandings in our religion are not relative. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, determines like this morality for us. And the Prophet, because he's the last messenger for all humanity, the ethics he espouses tend to have universality to them. So who's going to tell you lying is good? But then a lot of people lie. So don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't gossip. Honor promises. Honor oaths. Honor commitments. Be in a place where you recognize the importance of trusts. But the basis of their marriage is not, this man just made me so much money. I'm making more than I've ever worked with someone before. She's got a lot of loot. I should be married to her. I can inherit it. She's older than me. Maybe she'll die before I do. They married each other because they understood that the other was a good person. And you want to take from this two things. One, that the character was the drawing factor, but they had capacity to recognize good character. The other things did not become what was persuasive. Yusuf alayhi salam, his physical beauty is so much that the women of the court cut their hands. And the poets, they say that if the women of Yusuf saw the beauty of Muhammad, you wouldn't even know what they were cutting. So it's not that these things were not present as variables, but also what is it that causes people to shine is that sense of inward beauty. When you can see light, you can see nur. You can get to a place where you can recognize on your own face or someone else's face the realities of the haram that are committed. And then when you just see people and you just know, like, that's a good person. That's a person who's kind. That's a person who's caring. That's a person who honors trust. I can just see it on their face. Literal people would come and they would look at the Prophet and they would say that this is not the face of a liar. But if you can recognize what is not the face of a liar, you recognize it because you know also what the face of a liar looks like, right? So don't have a reductive understanding of the recommendation of deen that is just about what is outward. But deen in large part in our religion is also about akhlaq, character, how you treat people around you, the most intimate, the hidden members, the ones that are in your homes, your friends, your families. And they were so good that they recognized in each other things that people continuously passed them up for. And they didn't have a base that was purely in this way of what was outward and external. The practicality of it's hard because somebody might say to you, how can you marry this person? They don't do this, they don't do that. One, you're gonna love what you love. And your heart will love what you put it in front of. This is the nature of the heart. It can fall in love with anything. I could be in love with this laptop. Does not make any sense. And if you took my laptop, you love your phone. You know how I know you love your phone? How do you freak out when you can't find your phone? Your heart is attached to it. It's a form of love. But understanding that you ask yourself, why do I love the things that I love? And what is it that I'm attracted to? What is it telling me about myself? There has to be attraction, right? I had a Quran teacher who he sat with me one week and he was like, you know, my friends, they're telling me to marry this woman. And like I said, is she a hafiz of the Quran? And they said, yes, she's memorized the Quran. Does she recite well? She knows all of the recitations. And I said, then this is enough for me. I don't have to meet her. And I was like, Sheikh, I don't know, man. Like, I think you should go like meet this lady. And he was like, no, I love Quran. She loves Quran. We both love Quran. This will be the basis of our marriage. I was like, okay, like you're the Sheikh, right? And next week we were having class. And I was like, so, how's it going? He's like, I met the woman. I did not like her. We are not getting married, right? And I was like, okay. He was like, you should meet the woman you want to marry before. But, like, what's the basis of what he's saying? You can't be in a place where you're, like, living your life off of platitudes, right? There has to be a reality. When you read a book of fiqh on marriage, like, a lot of you know Surah Ikhlas, right? At the end of it, what does it say, right? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ صَمَدْ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدْ. Right? The kufu at the end, there's no equivalent to God. When you read books of fiqh about marriage, it's saying one of the things you want to look at is this variable that in this verse is talking about equivalence, that is what you're looking for in a spouse, like a sense of compatibility, equivalency. If you don't vibe well with somebody emotionally, your life is going to be hell. And if you marry somebody who is like beautiful in the masjid, but is a monster at home, like what? Why? I would rather marry the person who could learn how to practice. I'm already married and I love my wife. But people said this to me when I was not married. Everybody knew I wasn't married, right? I started working here when I was 22. My brother got married when he was 22. I was like, I'm going to get married when I was 22. I did not get married when I was 22. And not being married is very hard. I was in a place too, though, that I was like doing a lot more television stuff back then. I was like speaking, at things I still speak at. But in my 20s, it's a little bit more intriguing than when you're 40 and you're doing this. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. But everybody knew I was single. And I would get invited to speak at things. And I would always be the person that was talking about the single Muslim's perspective. Do you know? And then I'd be on these panels with these married people. And they'd just say such dumb stuff, man. This lady was on a panel with me. And she was telling an audience of like hundreds of people at a conference that you are not married. You should be so grateful. Because once you get married, you don't have any freedom. And you should like... And then I got on the mic and I was like, I'm sorry, but that's dumb what you're saying, Like, and this is what I said. I said, it's so stupid what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, there's people in this room who hate themselves because they're not married. It's so lonely, like, when you're not married. And think about what we do in our religion. You can't drink. You can't commit zina. You can't smoke up, right? You're not able to go. People still do it, right? But it's haram, right? What can we do? We just go out to eat. You know what I mean? And at some place, it like becomes something that's really hard, And then people say dumb things to you. I didn't get married until I was about to turn 29. People would come to me, don't you want to get married? And I'll be like, yes, it's exactly the problem. You're right. I didn't want it enough. That's why it wasn't happening. Do you know? But then I didn't know how to find someone to get married to. And my parents, they would tell me very supportingly, not deflecting, that you got to be good with who you get married to because nobody really gets what you do. And all kinds of people would come and they say, we have the perfect person for you. And I'm like, okay, who is that? It's Sheikh so-and-so's daughter. She studied for 7 years in this place and knows this and that. And I would say, respectfully, I'm not trying to marry myself, right? That's not what I want to get married. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that, but I know me, And I would be foolish to tell you that the first person I thought I was going to get married to in my life was my wife. I got married to her when I was about to turn 29, and she was 32. And I would be foolish to assume that that was the first person that she was trying to get married to. And in those moments that things didn't work out, every reason you can imagine someone would tell you you're not suitable to marry their child is things that people told me. It didn't mean that I had to negate those things or say that it didn't like feel good or celebrate the positives that I learned about myself and other things through them. But fundamentally, I couldn't imagine being married to anybody else. Do you know? And that's just what it is, right? And if somebody was to ask me, why did you marry your wife? Because I just think she's a good person. You know what I mean? Like my daughter and I were walking to school today and we were talking about boycotts, you know? We talk about random stuff. So today we're talking about boycotts. And, you know, she said one of her friends told her that you got to boycott this thing. And I said, do you know what a boycott is? And she said, you know, yeah, Baba, I think I know what it is. And so I said, do you know who Martin Luther King Jr. was? And she said, yeah. And she told me. And I said, do you know about like the bus boycott that he organized? And she said, yeah. And I said, tell me, right? Like, so when you have kids and they tell you they know something, here's like a life hack. Ask them to explain it to you so that they actually are able to then demonstrate to themselves that they know what they're talking about and they can express their ideas. So my daughter is telling me about this. And I said, so what did they do? And why did they do it? And we were talking about civil rights movement, anti-blackness, and, you know, getting her to a point. So I said, like, what do people do when they get on the bus? She said, they sit down. And I said, what do they do before they sit down? They wait in line to get on the bus. And I was like, why are they waiting in line? And we had just gotten on the M101. And I said, why were these lines of people waiting to get on the bus? And she said, because they're waiting to pay. And I was like, you have to pay to get on the bus. I said, so what happens when they stop paying? She said, there's no money. I said, who's not getting money? And she said, the people who own the bus. And I said, what do you then understand from this? That they didn't want to lose money. I said, so what did these black people do? They mobilized and they impacted them in their pocket, right? And I said, Medina, baby, it's important for you to understand that there's a lot of people in the world who they don't care about people, but they care about profits more than people. And so sometimes you have to hit them where it hurts their heart because they love wealth. And then I said to her, this is why you should know your mother's an amazing woman. Because she, in a city that's filled with millions of people, encouraged me that we become foster parents. And she went through the whole process to get us vetted and signed up and do whatever it is. And it's not that people don't know that there's children who have no one looking after them, but your mother actually decided that she wants to do something about it. And I said, baby, understand, I wasn't the one that said it. Your mother said it. That's how I know. Before we got married, my wife worked on Wall Street. She always volunteered as a rape crisis counselor. And after we got married, she made the decision as a person in her early 30s to leave her job on Wall Street to pursue a master's in social work and make a career shift starting all over again. In the first few weeks we were married, at 1 o'clock in the morning, my wife turned to me and she said, the hospital is calling. Somebody was just raped. They need me to go as a rape crisis counselor, her volunteer job. And she said, are you good with this? And I was like, what? Like, go. And then 4 hours later, she called and she said, my shift is done, but there's somebody else that just came in. I'm going to need to stay here to help them. That's how I know that I married the right person. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm saying this to you because at this juncture, we can have this conversation in a lot of different intangible ways. You have to marry someone who has inwardly a good heart. If you don't, you're telling yourself how precious your heart is to you, that you're willing to put it in the company of someone that will compromise on your care just because they can provide you with something materialistic. And it's not coming from me, it's prophetic recommendation. Marry for deen, but deen is also and mostly about character. Because how do you know the state of a heart? Well, you look at decisions that you make and you look at how you treat creation. Does this make sense? And so this is what the Prophet and Khadijah are both doing. And you have to understand that the Prophet has beautiful character and Khadijah has beautiful character. They both have good character. Do you get what I mean? Most people would say that Khadijah radiallahu ta'ala anha was 40 years old and the Prophet was 25. The Prophet alayhi salam, some people would also have different, on his age, a year or two, like younger potentially, but 25. With Khadijah radiallahu ta'ala anha, there's a lot of people whose opinion was that she was not 40. Some would say she was in her mid-30s. There's even opinions that say she was 28. But all of the same things apply in the scenario. Married twice, already has children, divorced, widowed, older than the Prophet of God. Why do these things not become like blocks and obstacles? And the same that we talked about, Hajar, peace be upon her, elderly black woman, is with Ismail alayhi salam. Zamzam sports forward. Remember we talked about this in the very first weeks of this Seerah class? This is how Mecca establishes itself, right? The Jurhum tribe come to where the water is. They negotiate with this old black woman. A tribe of Arab men are negotiating with this old lady and her baby. Like the baby can't even do anything. Where do the shifts come in gender dynamics, race dynamics? That they are honoring this woman in this way. Where does the shift come in? In the outward and externals, social constructs. And so hadith are important to understand, right? Islam began as something strange and it will return to something strange. Fatuba lil ghuraba, so give glad tidings to the strangers. You got to remember who your teacher is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You meet a woman who's older than you and she's got good character, then don't sit and intellectualize or what will people think. Who cares what people will think? You're in a place where you are meeting somebody who's good and they're younger than you or they don't have as much money as you. The insecurities and anxieties that come forth are not rooted in spiritual tradition of Islam. And all of these things then converge on one another. You want to marry somebody who you're not embarrassed by them based off of who they are in certain spaces, or you have to change them in order for you to feel validated in front of certain people. I don't love my wife, nor do I fall in love with her more and more every day because of the parts of her that remind me of myself. That's just a weird way of me loving me. I love her for who she is. We're very different people. Do you get what I mean? We argue. A lot of you will never put me in my place, right? My wife does not take anything from me. And she is constantly telling me where I am not doing right in the ways that I need to, in ways that are productive. That's what I need in my life. Do you know what I'm saying? You might not need those things, but all of us need people who are good human beings. And we have to then reciprocate that for ourselves. So you want to understand this, then understand it in this way. How does the Prophet do this? He doesn't tell his father at that time, Abu Talib, his uncle, that, hey, I'm of Quraysh, I want to get married. He says, I gotta like figure out a better way to get on my own feet. He already knows about his responsibility. The embrace of responsibility is attached to his sense of character. He's not saying, I'm gonna go find a rich woman, you know? He's saying, before I do X, I gotta get Y done. And he's going through this mode of self-actualization that is bringing responsibility and maturity in these ways. And so I want to take a pause here because I know I'm talking a lot. And then we'll talk about the actual like marriage process that they go through, the wedding, what it looks like. But what are you taking away so far from this? What's coming up? What's it bringing up for you? If you can turn to the person's next to you and talk about it for a few minutes, then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
Typically not so private, it's just in their journey of spirituality, driven by other things, they're still learning stuff. So the maturity aspect of looking for lasting, more durable and tested stuff in this day and age doesn't matter what country you back nowadays. It comes later. And even like they gave the example but it's a monster. It's the lack of fight. That's not that's what
Okay, so what are some of the things that are coming up? What are we talking about? What are we taking away so far? Any thoughts? What do we discuss? Yeah.
So we discussed, she brought up something that was very interesting. She was saying how it's very important to find the good in people and stuff, but the what you value as good in someone can be different for everybody. Like someone can be like, oh, I value like the person that volunteers and everything, and that's what I qualify as good. But someone else can be like bring art to the world and stuff. So that's my perception of like what's good.
Yeah, 100%. Look, when you get married, you're not two halves that make a whole. You're already a whole person, right? You're fully autonomous. So you can't take anecdotal advice from somebody else. When I sit with couples and other people, they're constantly in this place of, my friend told me like this or that. How will their marriage evidence what would happen in your marriage? Not only are you not them, you're marrying someone or married to someone that's not the person they're married to. They're four entirely different people in the entire scenario. You know, you got to know enough about yourself to know what is it that I can put up with, I can compromise, I love, and what's a deal breaker for me. Do you know what I mean? What else is coming up for people? What do we discuss? Yeah. Were you raising your hand to test me if I could see?
I was like, I didn't know if you could see. What we were talking about is the idea of not just thinking about what the other person can do and like what their like their factors and their characteristics. It's also like what you specifically can also do as a person. Like you're like if the idea of like what someone would like recommend, would the person like recommend you, like the people around you to be able to see like all the good that you're also doing. So then it's also like you're also shining a light in the spaces that you're in, and like you being the person that volunteers, you doing this stuff as well, and like bringing your whole self in the relationship as well.
Yeah. And what creates the atmosphere to do this? And this is where that compatibility factor is important. And there's no judgments in this, because it's not like, hey, I'm going to pray next to you or not, or we're going to eat iftar together. You're talking about marrying somebody. You should be judgmental and be in a place where you recognize like what your preferences are. How can I treat you well if the basis of our coming together was already rooted in superficial compatibility? And if we're in a place where I can't thrive and have the room to offer, because at the onset we should have never been together to begin with. So for some people, yeah, like I gotta marry somebody from my race or my culture, fine. But to say that's the only distinguishing factor always, like why? The fact that I'm going to marry someone that comes from the same background to me is not going to be what's going to make it work. It won't. Because like, how many people exist in the millions from your culture and your race? They all have their own unique personalities. That's why Islam is about self-actualization and self-awareness, right? He who knows himself knows his Lord, as the saying goes, right? Understanding this in the prism of this, because it is like a deeply important relationship. What if the Prophet didn't marry Letitia? Do you know what I mean? The entire experience would be so different post-revelation. Like, think about it. What if he married somebody that they fought with each other all the time, but they didn't fight in a healthy way? They fought in an unhealthy way, right? An unkind way. You know, because you're going to argue with the people you love, but you can argue and there's still respect, or you can argue and there's disrespect. Do you get what I mean? Right? And some of the things that come in, that we let go of stuff because The superficial is what then creates environments of suffocation or incompatibility or anger or whatever else that doesn't allow for me to flourish and then offer back, because I'm constantly in a place where I feel like I'm drowning in something. Do you get what I mean? Right? Other thoughts? And this is not to say that like other variables are not important, do you know? But this has to be one that's at the level of priority, emotional compatibility, and something that deals with reality at the end of the day. Do you know? So if we don't vibe well at the level of character, right? That you bring out the worst in me, I bring out the worst in you. And you don't want to make excuses for people's bad behavior, ever. I work with a lot of survivors of abuse. May Allah make things easy for them. The pattern that comes up is one that necessitates moving away from dissonance, that makes sense of things that are nonsensical. And this is where you got to sometimes be more Salafi in our tradition, because it doesn't matter what anybody else says. The Prophet's wife said about him, "Lam yadrib Rasulullahi imra'atan wala ghulaman wala waladan qat," that the Messenger of God never struck a woman or a servant or a child ever. And he is the manifestation of the Quran. It doesn't matter what somebody else's perspective is at that point. Do you get what I mean? That compatibility allows for character to surface well. You know? And when the supposed to's become too much of the focal point, it then can become a real challenge. Why is this also important to understand? Because the people who are around you, they might not be the ones who actually really know what is best for you. And it could be a real tough situation. You see what's going on in the world around us. May Allah make things easy for all people who are suffering through difficulty. I don't know why, but in most situations in this part of the world, Muslim experience quite often has its manifestation and trial and difficulty in relationships, familial relationships, spousal relationships, sibling relationships, right? If not you yourself, somebody that you know probably does not have something good going on with some part of family. It's so hard to get married. Why? And these are some of the things. But when you bring awareness to it, and you understand disagreement does not equate to disobedience, and sometimes you got to stand on your own feet so you're not giving up something in a way that becomes devoid of what is going to not just bring betterment for you, but bring betterment for somebody else. Do you really want your parents to stand on the day of judgment and you bring against them bitterness because they were making decisions that were short-sighted, because somebody came from a different race or culture or class? And it's broad, right? This is what the wali's role is. The wali's role is to make sure you don't marry an idiot, and you have to be open to the idea. They're there to have your back. You could fall in love with somebody that is not good for you, and you have to be open to this idea. It goes across the board, but self-awareness becomes like a part of this. And it's much easier to be self-aware when your heart is awake. And in our tradition, your heart is wakeful by being a person of good character, not a person of bad character. Lying darkens the heart, right? As much as kindness illuminates the heart. Do you see what I mean? So how could these two people who have beautiful hearts not fall in love with each other? Do you get what I'm saying? Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, she initiates the proposal. There's no structure to this in our religion. If somebody says the man has to propose to the woman, there has to be this, there has to be that. This have to cannot mean what we mean when we say you have to pray Fajr, right? It doesn't function in that way. Ali radiallahu an, when he wanted to marry Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, the daughter of the Prophet of God, he goes and asks for her hand in marriage. Umar radiallahu an, he wants his daughter to be married, and he wants his daughter to be married to the best people. So he goes and asks the Prophet, you can marry my daughter? If he asks like different individuals, Uthman radiallahu an, Abu Bakr radiallahu an, and then the Prophet comes and asks, and Abu Bakr said, I had an inclination that the Prophet was going to. Had he not done so, I would have married her. He's not like sitting back and saying, somebody's got to come to ask. He's going and saying, not only do I want my daughter to get married, I want to get married to like the best of the best. When the Prophet gets married to Khadija, she is the one that asks. I'm not denying like emotional tensions, core belief structures rooted in positives and negatives, and these kinds of things. These are all very real. That's why you have to have people that you talk to, that you can self-express, that are not solution-oriented, that share their anecdotal experience as somehow being able to evidence what will happen in your life, but allow for you to feel validated in your emotions, put everything out, and then help you to make your decisions. How can I tell you if you should marry someone or not? Unless, again, God forbid, you're telling me about someone who abuses you, then I'll be like, no, you should not marry someone who's abusive. Somebody comes and is like, I'm in love with this man, and he's so great. I'm like, oh, he sounds so beautiful, right? And what does he do? Oh, he like sells drugs to third graders, right? No, like, don't marry that guy. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? But that's not what the norm is. And why your head gets cluttered a lot is because you go and talk to people who don't give you room to express. They just tell you what to do because they don't know how to deal with their own anxiety on not knowing what to do. And now you got the pre-existing clutter plus all their clutter in your head. You know what I mean? I'm going to go home to my house and figure out how to make it work. I'm not going to be in your house. So how can I decide who you get married to? So you got to make sure that you're thinking about it in these ways, and it's a part of a recipe for success that there's goodness in character. Does that make sense? And then a willingness to acknowledge that as a token of appreciation. There's no feigned humility in our religion. You don't think the Prophet knew that he was an honest person? And that people thought of him as an honest person? So you got to have an awareness of yourself. Enhance gratitude through spiritual gifts. She, radiallahu ta'ala anha, asked for his hand in marriage. Do you think that that's an easy thing to do? To put yourself out there? No, it is not. But if you don't ask for it, then you will not get then what can come. And you have to be open to the idea that no is a possibility. And I wish there was a better way that it would just, be what it is, but it's not. Unilateral decisions are what impact these things. Both people have to agree. If one person does not, then both don't get together, right? But if you confront it again in these places, as you're navigating and you're not surrounded just by people who are saying, what will people think? What will your grandmother think? Like, this is what the people of Abraham tell the Prophet of Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is just what our ancestors did. That's why we do it. This is what they tell the Prophet of God in his propagation of Islam. You are the grandson of Abdul Muttalib. What would your ancestors say? Like, what would they say? And the base of it is that God trumps all of this. So I can't validate the haram that you do that's attached to a culturally hegemonic attitude towards religion. You meet somebody that's a good person, you know that you're going to have a good home with them. It's not an easy thing to find. You have to make decisions with foresight in this regard. When the proposal is put forward, the Prophet ﷺ, he goes and he asks his uncle. He doesn't have to ask his uncle, but he still asks his uncle. Why does he ask his uncle? You're going to see this as a common theme again and again because he's a good, respectful person. He goes to his elders. This is the dynamic of their relationship. You might not have the dynamic that this is. That's not a good or a bad. We all have different dynamics. There's not a prophet of God that we're taught about that does not have a family issue. Adam, peace be upon him, has 2 sons. One kills the other son. The prophet Abraham, he is the Khalil of Allah. His father is amongst the people who throw him into a fire. We could continue to go on and on and on about family issues that exist in the lives of the best people ever created in humanity. But in particular, the situational ethics of this circumstance is such that the prophet goes to his caretaker and says, "What do you think I should do?" And Abu Talib, he tells his nephew, just like when he said you should go work for her, that yeah, like this is a good thing. It's remarkable that you can only find goodness said about these 2 people. When they get married, there's like different things that are discussed in the scenario of their marriage, like the actual wedding itself, right? In Sharia, you have different opinions on the approval of a wali for the bride. In the Hanafi school, it's not seen as a requirement for the validity of the marriage contract. It's seen as a strong recommendation. The idea being that in Islam, men and women can carry out contracts of their own volition of all kinds, and so too the marriage ceremony in Islam is a contract. And what you are legalizing and rendering permissible is love in all of its forms, physical, emotional, spiritual, to its utmost. The other schools, the wali's approval is necessary for the woman who gets married for the first time. Not because they dominate and say you will marry only who I tell you to, but they're there to protect you and to make sure you're not marrying somebody who's foolish. You need to have these people in your life. I wish it was not the case, but we don't live in a tribal-based system. We live in a society that has this rugged sense of individualism. People can just make up all kinds of stuff about themselves. And you need somebody who's there to ask questions that can be difficult for you to ask, especially as your heart is becoming attached and you're falling deeply in love. Love is a very powerful emotion that can have us make justifications for things at times that don't look with foresight 5-10 years down the line. So the wali's role is exactly what I said it was. They're there to have your back, to make sure that you're not marrying somebody who is a fool. And it's important. This lady, I kid you not, this lady came, man, I could tell you stories of all kinds of things that I see in this work. This woman came, she called us numerous times in our office, emailed multiple times. The content of this is, I have to get married tonight. Already, I'm like, what is about to happen? I did not respond to this, right? And I'm walking from my office to where the front desk is to come here, and this lady and this man are sitting there together on like these benches we used to have that are not there anymore. And they're like, "Are you Khalid Latif?" And I was like, "Yes, unfortunately. What is this about to happen?" And she was like, "I called you and emailed you." And I said, No, you didn't just call and email. You called and emailed like 25 times in the last 3 hours, right? I didn't say that. I wish I'd said that. And we started to talk, just sitting in like this area. And she said, "Brother, I need your help. I have to have my nikah done tonight." And she's not like 18 years old. She's probably like in her late 30s, early 40s. And I'm like, "Sister, tell me like why?" Because I don't want to go in with assumptions. I don't know this woman. There could be anything, right? You can't presume that you know where people are coming from. Maybe she has a real valid reason as to why this happens, right? She did not, okay? So as she's telling me this, I'm like, "Tell me, like why? Like so I can understand." And she said, "Well, he is flying out of the country tomorrow back home to his family." I was like, "Oh, who's his family?" It's like his wife and kids. And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, I have to marry him tonight. So then he leaves tomorrow, like, and then we won't be able to get married for a long time." And I said, look, I'm going to tell you this because I love you, right? We don't even know each other, but just take it as a brother who cares about you. I don't know you. You could be a journalist that's looking to write a story about how this crazy Muslim imam got you married in this shotgun one-night stand wedding. I was like, do you understand? I was like, this is why most houses of worship, synagogues, temples, churches, and masjids require a civil marriage as a liability protection, because somebody could be committing immigration fraud. Somebody could be kidnapping somebody. I don't know you. Like, you could be from Fox News and you could have a camera on your lapel. And she's like, no, I'm not that. I was like, well, the other thing is, I don't know this man. I don't know if you know this man. But it's a problem that he's already married and he wants to spend the night with you tonight and then fly away thousands of miles. And you might think it's funny, but she's got nobody that has her back. What is she going to do? What do you do when you live in a world that is just built on loneliness at this point? When you just so much long for somebody that acknowledges your presence, that will provide you with a sense of care and affection even for some moments. And so I have to let her know that I care about her enough to say, don't make this mistake. Like, it's not worth it. This is what the wali should be doing. And if your wali doesn't do this because they're not a good father, they have no relationship, they're estranged, they're abusive, then they can't be the wali in this situation for you. It's not just semantics or technicalities. You understand? And when you grow to a place where you are somebody's wali, you have to honor the station of being a wali, because you will stand in front of God and be asked about how you cared for those that were under your guardianship. They're not just random mechanics to a ritual. It has to be taken seriously. And so here, it's relevant in this situation, because some would say that at this time, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, it's pre-Islamic situation, but there's still these customs, right? And understandings of gender play out societally. So there's different perspectives. Did her uncle, like other male relatives, or was her father, Khuwaylid, right? Her name is Khadija bint Khuwaylid. Khadija, the daughter of Khuwaylid. Was Khuwaylid the one that was present at this wedding? What a lot of these narrations talk about is that at the marriage itself, that Khuwaylid was present, but was deeply intoxicated, was drunk. Because they were allowed to drink. There's no alcohol prohibition. There's no Islam at this point, right? And as the wedding proceeds, there's meher, there's other things. They come to an agreement. It's all there. Khuwaylid sobers up a bit. And he's in this gathering and he says, what's going on? And they say, what do you mean? And he says, what's happening here? And they say, your daughter just got married to Muhammad. And he said, how? Like, nobody asked me. And they said, what do you mean? We were all sitting here and you were right there. And it all happened. Now he's in this place where he's bringing himself in a way that likely also, if not directly, we know of people who have that family member that makes things about them that are not about them. And they get to a place of reconcilement where he is just not hearing it. He needs to be the one that has what he is saying is his right. And so he comes to a conclusion that says, well, one of two things. Either what you're saying happened and my permission was given, and that's what allows for it to take place, or I'm going to give my permission right now, and that's the only reason that it's something that's allowed to happen. And you could say, do people do this? And I could tell you, as somebody who's been conducting thousands of weddings, I have seen brides and grooms in tears because of the egos of their elders in these places. Why is it important to understand? The Prophet went through it at his wedding too. And understand that we relate to the Prophet in so many different ways, but he can also relate to people because of all the things he experiences. He's not doing this when it comes time for his Fatima to get married. Zainab, when she is married to someone who's not Muslim, and we talk about this story in the Seerah, it is beautiful the way the Prophet affirms the love that Zainab has for her husband. And you want to take lessons from it. Allah blesses you with kids. You're blessed to be part of these things when you grow. Celebrate with the people. Don't make it harder for them. Don't take away from their joy on a day that's supposed to be something that's joyous. It's okay that the wedding is about the bride and the groom, and it's not about you and your ego. Do you get what I mean? You got to be smart on the other end and pick and choose your battles, because you're trying to be married, not have a wedding. So you want to be smart as to where and how, like dynamics in family surface that have nothing to do with what your mind is telling you it has to do about. It's got nothing to do with whether you should marry this person or not. You're just now seeing like the issues that exist amongst your relations that you never really addressed adequately before, and they're surfacing. What can you do? Your mother is not a kind human being. What can you do? Your father has like his own issues. They're surfacing in these ways. But you got to be smart about what's the end goal. The Prophet is married to Khadija. Khadija is married to the Prophet. And then they have a love story that's unlike anything that one can imagine. But realities come into play. Why is it beautiful? Because it gives us that much more insight to the humanness of our Prophet. You got family problems? The Prophet had to deal with family issues too. In-laws are in your face? The Prophet's in-laws causing whatever is going on there. They still got married, and they still then had the meaningful relationship. And when everything else is gone, the two of them have their home together that they're building together. From 25 to 35, there's nothing that we really have about what's happening now in the life of the Prophet. For a decade. Our 35 is when this instance of the Kaaba being rebuilt comes up that we'll talk about next week. The Prophet's married at 25. He's now at 35. He's married to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha and no one else. And you could say, well, isn't that what's the norm? No, in Meccan society, pre-Islam, men had many wives, women had many husbands. There's a lot of different types of relationships. It was just these two and these two together. This religion is deeply built on love. If somebody tells you love has nothing to do with Islam, they're wrong. The hadith just says it again and again. Iman is intrinsically linked to love, right? You will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, right? By default, your sister. Imam Nawawi, in his commentary on this hadith, he says, The word brother in this hadith is not in reference to your brother in faith, but your brother in humanity. Just love people. لَن تَدْخُلِ الْجَنَّةَ حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَن تُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى تُحَابُوا. You will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. حَتَّى تُحَابُوا. It's reflexive. The companions asked the Prophet about where they'll be in paradise, who they'll be with. Al-maru ma'man ahab, that a person will be with the one that they love. Again and again and again. Love, love, love. And you see love here in this place. Why is it important that you have love that's not this like kind of idealistic, utopian-esque sense, or you only think about love as romantic love or physical love or erotic love? Because everything goes back to God in this religion. And when you can allow for yourself to experience love and believe that you're worthy of being recipient of love, and you can just understand what that's like when you're immersed in it, it can then create the opportunity to think out that if this is what love is like from a human to a human, what must divine love really be? The love of God. And not all of us, but some of us are not willing to let ourselves be fully loved. And we don't fully love, not because there's not people who are worthy of our love, but it's hard for us to love fully when we don't like things about ourselves. So love for people what you love for yourself also means it's okay to love for yourself, so you can love you. Do you get what I mean? And then your marriage isn't seen as like an antidote or a remedy, but it's something that enhances, because the starting point foundationally is rooted in healthy expressions of love. And getting love from my community, which I'm so grateful for, and the ability to love this community, which is such a great sense of strength and courage. Love from my daughter, my son, being in love with my wife, loving my friends, loving my family, but only being able to open that in an embracing way, probably from the time I'm in my 30s onwards. I couldn't tell you that this is how I saw the world in my 20s or in my teens. I never even think about it. Do you know? But then allowing that to then be able to comprehend in whatever capacity, what does it mean that Allah is Al-Wadud? Loves me more than my wife loves our daughter? That's the God I want to pray to. And these two that have this compatible relationship allows for this consistent reminder of the presence of love and the importance of love, and loving yourself in such a way that says, that good person loves me, there must be something good about me. I don't have to hate on myself. And then they pass it on. It becomes contagious. People who nobody thought there was anything good within them, the Prophet taught them to see their beauty. And even when everything else felt difficult, the most trustworthy man in the entire place, doesn't matter what you think about me, he loves me. And he's telling me God loves me. How can I then not love myself? Because I see myself through the eyes of the messenger and understand that that becomes a conduit to see myself the way that God sees me. And so who you get married to is an important thing. Don't take it lightly. And understand where and how that if it's not something that happens, it's still something that could potentially come. And if it doesn't, the same God loves you. Why do you think there's nothing that's really reported from 25 to 35? It's a decade. what might be the reason as to why we don't have so much that's coming up? And to give you some background, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the Prophet alayhi salam, has different children through Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the majority of whom pass away in their childhood. But Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha is born like other children are born, right? Qasim, you have Kulthum, you have others that are birthed and pass. But this is all happening. The Prophet's recently married. Like, there's these things going on. So what is potentially reasons from 25 to 35 that there's not like major things that we're discussing? We talked about so much stuff already, from like being a baby until 25 years of age. And then now there's a gap for 10 years. If you could turn to the persons next to you, why do you think that might be? What are some of the reasons as to why there's this gap for 10 years and the context of some of what we're talking about? And then we'll come back and discuss and we'll wrap up for tonight. But go ahead.
Spend a lot of time turmoil, choices in the work social that was just the period. It's like, why document the past? طول حياتي أنا ما عرفت الإسلامية خالص، لكن سنتين يعني موسم السنة في شهر محرم مش محتلف يعني like there's no like this part or something. لا it's not like a aspect of this year. It's not a holiday, so let's just say yeah, so it's everyone goes to work, everyone
Okay, so why do you think? Why is there this 10-year gap? What's going on at that time? What do we think? Why is there a 10-year gap?
How many kids she had that passed?
There's different opinions on it, because they had multiple children. The Prophet.
That could have possibly been a reason, no? You don't think so?
Yeah.
Depression or depressed state, you don't want everybody to, like, depression can linger from days, hours, weeks, months, years.
Sure.
And if you have multiple kids dying back to back to back, that can really stunt you.
Yeah, there's time in between, but it is a lot. They had a lot of children that passed away. Yeah.
I think this was what I was thinking. They were married for 10 years, of course, more than 10 years, but like those 10 years, they were building their life together, right? They're starting from something, getting somewhere. And of course, as you mentioned, they would fight and like all that stuff. But it's like, a spousal relationship is very private, right? This is the universe, sort of like even God respecting their privacy. And that's why none of the stuff that happened, or like lots of stuff that happened even at the time, isn't reported down to us.
All the things we've been talking about, though, we're looking at this in the frame of pre-prophethood impacts who he is as a prophet, right? So what's going on in this 10 years that is getting him connected to that role? Do you see what I mean? And these are all like really great answers, but there's still, like, it's a decade, And it's not a decade that, like, I don't know what part of your life that a decade isn't like a meaningful chunk of your life, but this is like 25 to 35. Do you know what I mean? Right, in lunar years, So it's like 23, 33, like in our kind of understanding. Do you know what I mean? So what's happening during this time? Yeah.
He's probably learning how to be a part of a family, for one, because you're talking about someone who comes from a very almost adopted family, and I imagine that learning curve is really steep if now he has like a responsibility, but also an opportunity that he hasn't had for his entire life, and everything that's associated with that takes a while to adjust to, perhaps.
Yeah. Other thoughts, like building off of this? For 10 years, it's not that there's not things happening, but engaging in responsibility that is going to definitively play itself out. Like, think about how the prophet being a good husband enables him to be a good prophet. Being a good father, being there at a time, children have passed away. Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, they describe her Abiha, the mother of her father, right? Resembling the Prophet more than any of the companions. He's got a deep connection to his child. In our understanding of just how we find meaning and contentment in these kinds of things, what gets in the way sometimes of benefiting from these relationships, right? Think about it. Even where it's uncomfortable, don't push yourself, but think as best as you can. Because you could have had any number of distinct scenarios, but how present were the elders in your life at like young ages in your life? And why were they not? Or why might they have been? Which ones were and which ones were not? And when they were there, in what ways were they there? Just as a physical body, or were they fully present in the truest sense of the words? Because you're going to have instances later on. The Prophet is the military commander. He is like for all intents and purposes, like governor, president of Medina. He runs like the political, the social, like the counselor. And he's still talking to a little boy whose baby bird dies. There's a hadith. People are gathered around. The Prophet asks them what happened. And they say his pet bird died. And then the Prophet goes to the little boy. Ya Aba Umair, ma fa'ala an-nughair. That, oh, Abu Umair, what happened to an-nughair, the little bird, right? There's emotional intelligence. There's all this different kinds of stuff, do you know? But you can't, like, have responsibility honored in a conditional way. So your line of work can't be the reason as to why that somebody else is raising your children. If I go to Morocco, I don't want somebody else to be my kid's dad because I'm assisting people in the aftermath of an earthquake. You know what I mean? People are going to say, like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm taking my kids to a balloon museum. Well, why? Right? Because they're my kids, and they're kids, and they should be allowed to be kids. Do you know? But I'm their father. So I want to be their father. I want to be my wife's husband. I want to be my parents' child. And what's beautiful in this religion, like if you come to the Monday night halaqah, we're looking at the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, relationships don't stop with death in our religion. You can still impact your beloveds after they transition into the next phase of existence. The Prophet continues to do things for Khadija after she passes away. We'll talk about this next week. But why is he doing that? Because there's not finiteness to it in the ways that we think about it sometimes. When we're not looking at it through the prism of what our religion teaches us, but we're thinking about it unconsciously through what society imposes upon us, on ideas of mortality and death and these kinds of things. So your loved ones that have passed, they still exist right now, whether you believe that or not. Right? May Allah grant them ease. So here, for 10 years, everything is just happening in this way where he's still a person that we know him to be. He honors responsibility and trust when he's in the business realm. He's taking care of these sheep the way he needs to. He's doing right by all these people. You don't think he's going to do right by these people now that are in his immediate household? And there's nothing without meaning in Allah's plan. Revelation could have come down at 26. It could have come down at 28. It could have come down at 32. It comes at 40, but it comes also after this long extended period of time where he is now learning, as you said, which is important. Like what I was saying before, it doesn't matter how long you have known the person you are getting married to. It has no bearing on it. You will not learn how to be someone's husband or wife until you are their husband or wife. You cannot learn how to be somebody's parent or really how to be someone's child other than just experientially being these things. And it's not going to be because someone else has done it this way that yours is going to look that way. So going through it necessitates assessment and reflection to be able to then say, am I even doing this thing the way that I need to? And this man who honors the rights of all creation, he's getting now a key learning moment that can only come from spending time with the people in your household. So for a decade, there's not anything really big that takes place because he's doing what a good man would do during this time. And there's no other way to describe it. It will look very different for people circumstantially. Sometimes a good man is going to have to live in a different part of the world, work on a cruise ship. A good mother be away from her children because life circumstances define that this is the way that I can make provision be a means for my children. We don't want to have like limited understandings of it. But a lot of us in this room, we will have the choice of whether we will be present or not. Or we will have the choice as to how we will make sense to those who are present for us or not. When I walk down this street in the middle of the night, because I'm sitting here doing work, and that street cart guy is still in front of the library selling chicken and rice, you don't think that guy's got a family? You go to a diner that's 24 hours. Have you ever seen like people? I've had people who are as old as my grandfather deliver food to my apartment. You cannot have myopic perspective that it only looks this way when someone is providing care. Do you get what I'm saying? And you can draw upon this from the Prophet's life, alayhi salam, where and how he sees this as an important responsibility. It's part of his training, but he's doing what he does within the circumstances of his existence. And that's what you got to do too, because trust, honor, care, character becomes the foundation of anything. Just because you can get away with telling the child that I didn't do this or that, look at all the things I did for you, doesn't mean that it's true. There's some people who don't have a choice. That guy's going to work in that place for 12 hours, 14 hours, because that's what he's going to do. May Allah increase him and bring benefit to him, right? Can you imagine? I mean, you've seen these same videos I've seen. The audacity of this guy who is like harassing hatefully a street cart vendor, a chicken and rice person. What gives him that sense of dehumanizing and the boldness to act on his thoughts in this way? Nobody's like sitting and thinking that that guy is just working as hard as anybody else. He's probably working a lot harder than any of us. And so you got to channel that. And some of that only comes in adulthood realizations of where and why there was presence and absence at younger ages. So we don't pass on generational traumas or bad habits and these kinds of things. And some of it is just because people didn't do what they were supposed to do. So be like the Prophet. Do what you're supposed to do, whether it's convenient or not, and see it as a mechanism for your own growth and socialization. So we go forward, we're going to see like some of the things that come up in relation to the Prophet's children. We'll talk about this instance of the placing of the black stone, and then get into discussions on prophethood after. Just a few things before we wrap up. Tomorrow there's a halaqah in here with Imam Zakir Ahmed. We have an organization called Faith NYC that we work with, and they're going to be hosting a monthly halaqah they've been doing here for the last few months. It's aimed towards our professionals community. A lot of people come. There's usually food involved and stuff too. We'll have iftar as well, so come for that. On Friday, we're doing a Know Your Rights workshop in this space. It'll be in English and in Spanish, hosted with CUNY Clear. You should come just so you can understand how to engage law enforcement yourself. But if you also know people who are Spanish speaking that can benefit from this, it's important, right? This is a country that in just a short period of time, and decades is not a long period of time. In a short period of time, demographical change will be such that 1 out of every 4 people in this country will be Latino, you know? It's a lot of people, right? and you think about this in the standpoint of power structures rooted in whiteness and anti-blackness, they're not trying to have like brown people be successful. And we already see invasive practices that are rooted in anti-blackness that are becoming that much more targeted towards our Latino brothers and sisters. So if you know people who speak Spanish and they could benefit from this, they could be anybody, right? They don't have to be Muslim. Just bring them down. We'd love for them to come. But you should come so you're aware of your rights. You can convey to others. That'll be here on Friday, starting at 6 o'clock. And on Saturday, we are hosting a film screening of a documentary called The Town Called Victoria. Deals with a lot of different things around Islamophobia that we're experiencing in this town. We'll have members of the team doing a talk back after. There'll be dinner as well. It's from 5:30 to 9 in the room that we do Jummah in upstairs. We already have like over 100 people that have RSVP'd for it. I think there's room for like 150 or so. So definitely come and check that out. And then on Sunday, we're having a IC professionals meetup. It'll be on the 10th floor of the building next door. It's a group that we started that's not necessarily about people who have jobs, but people who are at the undergrad phase of their life. And that's going to be from 5 till 9. We'll have food there as well, and just some different opportunities to build community and network. There's already like I think around 220 people that signed up for that. We usually get like 300-ish people that come to it. And it's a nice space. If you are here on Sunday or you know people who could benefit from it, definitely tell them to come by for that. Next Friday, so not this week, but the following week, on December 8th, we're going to have a Black Muslim meetup. That's going to be in room 914 of the building next door. So if you or people you know who self-identify as Black are free on Friday evening, we'll have a meetup for anyone in the community, student, undergrad, grad student, community member. We have a very robust Black Muslim initiative that is student-led here. Our Black Muslim lecture series has been on hiatus with a lot of the other programs that we've been doing. With the escalated violence in Gaza, may Allah make things easy for them and end the occupation there. We're going to start resuming some of those programs again and adding like the communal engagement part. So that'll be next Friday night. Definitely come to that if you can. And on Saturday, we're doing a program that talks about the roles of Mary and Jesus, peace be upon them both, within our tradition, hosted by our Latino Muslim group and our convert group, but open to everyone. And that'll also have Spanish interpretation, translation along with it. Imam Daniel Hernandez is going to be speaking at it. It'll be something that all of us should come to, but specific. It's a way for us to have people bring their family members in our convert community to be able to learn and understand where certain kind of principles and teachings exist in our religion, and there's commonality and understanding there as well. And we'll be doing similar programs within other identity variables for members of our community that identify as converts and have non-Muslim family members. But if you know people who could benefit from that, especially as they're going home for the holidays, or there's like this kind of disconnect around holiday experiences, have them come, and we'll advertise all of these things as well. Okay, so let's take a pause here. We'll see everybody next week, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.